Hey y'all, when it comes to questions, questions could save your life. Questions provide so much discernment. Questions are a blessing from God, right? This is the reason why Jesus asked so many questions. This is why he also tells us to consistently ask questions because of what it does. If you only knew that if you asked questions, how much it could have saved you from being in a relationship that you shouldn't have been in, or a relationship that killed your heart or destroyed you and your feelings and everything that you had to go through, right? Even a marriage, if you only knew how strong and how crucial questions are to getting into a relationship, right? Questions provide discernment, which allows you to see deeper, right? You ever had thoughts in your mind after a relationship and you're like, yo, like, why didn't I know this about that person before, right? Like, how didn't I figure out that they was like this before? Like, why is this person so evil and I couldn't figure that out? And you're like, this person manipulated me and they did all of these things. But what if you would have asked questions? I learned that because that's what I've been through. I asked those questions to myself, like, I couldn't figure this out. How didn't I know this? But I noticed I didn't ask any questions. And then I noticed Jesus kept telling me to ask questions. So today, we're speaking about 5 really important questions to ask before getting into a relationship, before dating, before marrying anyone, right? And this is part 1, so I'm coming with more questions. But today, we're asking some crucial questions. I'm going to teach y'all how to have discernment, right? I'm going to teach y'all how to ask the question. Not just only asking the question, but why the question is important and how to ask that question as well. Well, I'm going to try. Well, anyway, let's start. The first question that I believe that everybody should ask anybody before they get into a relationship, before they start dating, before they marry this person, before you ask her to marry you, before you say yes to him marrying you, this is one question that needs to be asked. And this question is, what is love to you? Yes, you should ask that person, what is love to you? Now, when it comes to these questions, you don't gotta ask them in an interview style. You don't gotta interrogate this person. You could just, you could be playful, or, y'all trying to learn, or y'all having a good conversation, and you just ask the question. I usually play like a game called the question game, right? Where we ask each other questions, fun questions, funny questions, serious questions, right? So y'all could do it that way. But this question is, what is love to you? Now, the reason why you should ask this person that question is because you're getting inside of this person. You're actually getting into their world. When you ask this question, you actually get to see what love is to that person, because everybody grew up differently. You don't really know what love is. A person's love could be truly based on how they grew up, right? Like, they can say, I love to me is when somebody hugs me. Love to me is when somebody says good words to me, right? Especially if this person is a Christian, like, you really want to know what love is, because we know that God is love, right? So we want to see how that person sees love, right? You anything can be love to somebody, man. Like somebody just being there, or somebody talking to them, right? You really want to get a good scope of what it is. Or it can be somebody who understands love a little bit more. Like, love is an action. Love is not just a feeling. This person understands that love is me sacrificing myself, me thinking of others, me considering them, me giving to them. Love is when a person is willing to do that for me as well. Love is when I can see that this person is not a selfish person, but they're willing to sacrifice their time, their effort, their emotions for somebody else. Kind of like loving a child, right? This is how you get a scope. It helps you to see if this person's view of love is distorted, which it could be based on how they grew up, or if it's a mature perspective, right? You get to see what love is. You also get to engage with this person, right? Maybe speak about it or whatever and see how they are. What truly happens is you get to see inside of that person's mind of how they think. And that is what is the most important when it comes to getting into these relationships, because you're really actually getting into a relationship with a person's thought process, the way that they think. You're really marrying and dating someone's mind, right? This is why we have these issues, and this is also why we have love. It's based on how a person thinks. So it's really crucial to know what love is and how love looks inside of that person's mind. Not only how it feels towards them, but what do they see as them giving love to someone else? right? You really need to know that so that you can see how love might be presented to you as well, right? You don't want to walk into a relationship where a person is not willing to love you, or they're thinking that you're complaining and all this other stuff, right? So it's really, really crucial to understand and really ask that question to understand what a person is. The next question is, what is a spouse to you? Like, what defines a spouse to you? That is a good question to ask somebody, right? And I know y'all see the question, y'all see how I'm wording it, like to you, because you want to get into that person's mind again, like, so you want them to paint that picture of what it is, right? It kind of helps you to see what you would be walking into with this person because of how they view it. So what is a spouse to you? Like, what is a husband to him? If you want to see how he views a husband's being, like the qualities or the values, the qualities, or just how a husband is, right? And to a woman, you want to ask her, what is a wife to you, right? Because some people see it different, right? Some people see a wife as, oh, I go to work, I pay bills, and I cook, right? They might just see that as a wife. A husband might see like, I just pay the bills and my wife cook, and we got traditional values, and like that's a good question to ask, because a lot of times we get into these relationships and then a person is acting a way and we're confused on why they're acting like this, and it's bothering us so much. So you want to see, how do they view marriage in their mind? What does it look like? Because they could have been brought up with no parents. They could have been brought up with divorced parents. They could have been brought up in a single parent home. We don't really know how they see this. We also want to see if they're open to new information, open to new knowledge. Are they willing to maneuver or adapt to a different perspective of what a husband or a wife is, right? It's really crucial, again, to ask a person, what is a spouse to you, just to get the viewpoint of how they see this. Because again, you don't want to walk into a relationship or to a marriage with this person who is acting this way in which you don't see a spouse being. This person itself is like, I don't do those things. What are you talking about? Y'all never discussed it. You never asked. But now you're seeing it, and it's killing you on the inside because you didn't think this person was like that, but you never asked. So you gotta ask questions. The next question is, what was your childhood like? That is a very good question to ask. Why? Because most of our traumatic issues, most of our characteristics, our values, the way that we think, how we were conditioned, the way that we live comes from our childhood. The way that we feel, the way that we see things comes from our childhood, right? When you do research, it talks about how most of our ways started from our caregivers when we was a kid, when we was a child, right? Even our traumatic issues, right? Even the way that we want love, it may even come from when we were a child, from how that person loved us or how that person didn't love us. And that's a good view to see from that person. How was your childhood like? What was your childhood like? What did you experience when you was a child? How was your mom and dad in the house, right? Because what happens in the home tends to go outside of the home. So if I lived like this, if I went through this, right, when I was in the house with my mom and my dad, or without my mom and my dad, or in a abusive home with my mom and my dad, guess what's going to go outside that house? That viewpoint, those feelings, those emotions, the way I see, the way I act, it's going outside. Not to say that that person will still be like that, but you still want to get a good scope, right? Because even if you ask that, right, that's good to understand this person way more, even if they are not in a bad way, but you'll understand them. So when it comes to issues that y'all come up with, you remember how their childhood was, or when it's something that they need, you'll remember how their childhood was, right? It actually helps you have more grace. I think it also helps you to forgive people even more too. So it's a very good question, and it helps with the relationship in so many ways. So I believe you should always ask what a person's childhood was like, so you can get a scope on their life, of how they grew up, of how they were conditioned, of what they saw coming up, and what they may even need help with now that you're in a relationship or a marriage. The next question is, what is communication to you? Now, that is an extremely crucial question to ask. You know why? Because communication is like one of the number one killers of a relationship in a marriage. Some people communicate, some people don't communicate, some people communicate more, some people communicate less, some people express themselves, some people don't express themselves, some people speak low and soft, some people speak loud. Some people feel like they can reassure others, some people feel like they shouldn't. Some people feel like they don't gotta explain themselves, some people feel like you should explain yourself. Some people raise their voice because their families raise their voice. Some people don't, and they think, you know what I'm saying? Like, communication is crucial because you need to understand. Matter of fact, here's another one. Some people grew up in a house where the families communicated their issues, right? When they had an issue, they communicated it out, they pieced it out, they understood each other. In some families, I think most families don't do this. So most families, or a lot of families, grew up in a home where they didn't communicate their issues. They had issues, they was mad at each other, they swept it under the rug. The next day, they didn't even talk about it. It was gone, right? So this is why communication is extremely important, because you need to understand how a person grew up communicating. You need to understand how they would like to communicate. You need to understand what they would need to communicate. You need to understand how they view your communication, right? See what communication is to them, right? Don't just ask them, what do you need for communication? Ask them, what is it to them, so that they can present to you what it looks like in their life, what communication is to them, and then see if they're open to anything that you may need, right? Because that's a good way to discern how they are, to discern what is gonna happen later on. You need to figure out these things. Trust. I've been in relationships where I asked that, and the person never wants to communicate. And they grew up with a family who didn't, right? At all. Me, I'm a communicator. As you can see, I'm communicating in this video. And communication is like water in a relationship, right? It's like a flower. If you got a flower and you water it, it's gonna grow strong and beautiful. But if you don't water it, it's gonna die. Communication, you need communication in a relationship for it to stay strong, for it to grow, and for it to last, right? If you cut off communication, it dies. That's just a fact. Same thing with God. When you don't communicate with God, you feel distant from him. When you communicate to him a lot, you feel closer to him. It's the same thing with us. Communication is crucial. So it's very important, extremely important, to ask a person, what is communication to you? Like, what does communication look like, right? Ask that question and discern, see how they are, and then present the type of communication that you like, or that you see, or whatever it is in your life, or however you see communication to that person, and see how they view it as well, or see what they take from that. That's a good way to see inside of a person. The next question is, what annoys, irritates, or frustrates you? Yeah, that's a good question too, because we get into relationships with people and we don't know what bothers them. You need to know what annoys, frustrates, or irritates this person. Why? Because you want to know if you can deal with it. That's one reason. You want to know if you can deal with what bothers this person, right? Because somebody might be bothered by you saying, like, can I have a hug? Where my hug at? Right? And you just communicating, you ain't mad, but that person may feel a way about that. You want to know, can you deal with that? Right? Somebody might be annoyed by other things. It might be the smallest thing. It might be a big thing. You want to know if you can handle it. But you also, let me tell you, you need to know what frustrates, annoys, and irritates this person as well, because you need to know if you're able to provide what they need. If you can give them that, right? Because sometimes what bothers a person is what they need the most. You get what I'm saying? Like, they need love in this area, so it would bother them if they didn't receive that. So now you would need to learn what they need in order to provide it for them. Now, again, this is the 5 really important questions that you need to ask before dating, before marrying, before getting into a relationship with somebody, because you don't want to walk in blindsided. You really need to discern this person. You really need to get into their life, get into their mind, figure out if if you are willing to get into that with them, if you're able to move forward with them rather than just relying on your emotions, right? Because a lot of time we rely on our emotions. We're like, oh, this feels good, but you know nothing about that person. And then you get in relationships based off infatuation, and then you start to learn these things, and guess what? It start crumbling down because the foundation wasn't built on truth and understanding of who this person was or learning this person. It was built off how you felt. And you don't want to build a relationship off of feeling, because it's going to come crumbling down, as they always do. So we have to learn people. We have to understand who they are. We have to see their values. We have to see what they value. We have to see what's important to them. We have to see if they're open-minded or closed-minded. We have to see if they're willing to learn and grow with us. So questions are very important. We need to always ask questions. Again, it don't have to be an interview, an interrogation. It can be fun. Make it fun, make it light, make it peaceful. Make it so that they're willing to open up, right? And you got to be willing to open up too. So again, this is part 1. I'm coming back with more questions. We got some more really important questions that people forget to ask. So we ain't going to be forgetting no more. We're coming up with these questions. I'm going to need y'all to ask them, right? And ask them in a kind way, nice way, fun way, whatever. So make sure that y'all write them questions down. And I hope it helped y'all. I love y'all. And I'm going to get at y'all when I get at y'all.